Hey, Brent Porcio, and we got Nick Randazzo here at the @TopVelocity #Pitching Tips show, where you ask us a question, we answer it. And this is our second, version or series of the @TopVelocity #Pitching Tips show. If you haven't followed us yet from the previous season, follow us now. Subscribe, whatever it takes. Keep up with these. We're going to try to be more frequent in putting them out. We've been having fun so far with them. We got Nick here, who just became a 90-plus testimonial. Overdone. It's been a couple of years. He's been waiting for it, and he finally got to 91. It's impressive. If you haven't watched his testimonial on how it happened, the process, what he went through, the experience and everything, watch that. Pretty cool episode. So let's get started. Here's our first question. It says, Brent, you got to put this more in layman's terms for me, please. I'm really interested in the slowdown phase of the delivery. So basically, he's talking about this study called elbow flexion post ball release is associated with elbow varus deceleration moments in baseball pitching. In layman's term, varus moments are the back of the arm. So when the arm goes into deceleration, all these deceleration forces out here, you know, a lot of guys get bicep pain, they get top of the forearm pain. That's all from your body fatiguing, that arm fatiguing from deceleration forces. And what it's saying is the more flexion you have, so this is extension, the more elbow flexion you have at release, you get more of those varus stresses on the arm, more of those deceleration stresses on the arm. And I'll let Nick add in what he feels and how it works with him. But basically, what happens is if you're a guy who's very rotational in his trunk, like you're very aggressive to rotate, maybe you're early trunk rotating, you're pulling hard, what happens is your arm, the centrifugal force wants to pull your arm away from your body. So what guys try to do is they try to fight and they try to pull it inside 90 and fight against that centrifugal force. And then everything also wants to come across the body really quick. And because of that, you're pulling in to release. So you're gonna stay more flexed. Also, they talked about how curveballs can do that. You're trying to pull down on a curveball. It's the same kind of effect. When you're fighting those centrifugal forces, you're pulling in. When you're trying to pull down on a curveball or grip a curveball, you start pulling in, and it starts creating all these nasty stresses in the varus moment, bicep, top of the forearm. And really at the end of the day, what can help that? A lot of guys think you got to get stronger. Of course, getting stronger helps, getting some more forearm strength helps. But if ultimately you can stay more linear, which means your trunk isn't fighting or creating all of its forces in rotation, it has a lot of its forces being catapulted forward. What happens is when more of your energy is going forward, well, what's the resisting force is laying back. So now your arm's just laying back and it's fighting to just stabilize going back. And then where does it want to release? It wants to release forward. And when you see a guy with a lot of elbow extension to release, he's got a very linear trunk, a lot of linear forces going through his trunk, and it's causing him to extend to those forces. It's not like he's pushing his arm. His arm is just being thrusted forward with that energy, and then it kicks back into rotation. So those guys are gonna have less of those stresses on the varus side of the elbow. So, or the lateral side, you would more accurately say. So it's really learning to be more linear. And what's that is getting more linear momentum, staying more separated, and transferring more linear energy through the trunk, and then you won't have all that hard flexion fighting, pulling inside 90, which is going to create all those forces. What do you think about that?
So my biggest thing, like a year ago, I was supposed to walk on for UNO, and I had the varus strain, like he said. I would get out of my load too early. I wouldn't get to a good linear force vector, and I would jump, and then all the velocity would be coming from the arm, and I would just spin. My front foot would land. I would spin across, and I would have that strain in my bicep and in my forearm. So I wasn't able to do it because I was having pain there. And recently, the biggest thing for me was allowing my trunk to get towards the target and let it carry all the force instead of just trying to generate it all last second with the arm.
And you found more velocity doing that.
Yeah, it's less stress with more velocity.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing, is you can get more velocity, less stress, the more you create a linear trunk and not those opposing more rotational trunks. Now, don't get me wrong, we all rotate. It's just if you're dominating rotation for your forces, then you're going to be fighting flexion or pulling hard inside 90, and you're going to create more forces on the arm as opposed to the linear trunks, and you're going to get more velocity. So it's like the best of both worlds. So we nailed that one. So next one, let's go on to, it says, should the ankle and the hips move separately as well as the hips and shoulders? It sounds like a pretty kind of weird question, but it's really not, because it's a kinetic train, right? So all the way from your toes to your fingertips, we're sequencing this. What does that mean? We're timing when it goes off, right? And if you think of a whip, what do you do with the whip? Well, you start with the handle and then it moves up the whip, and it's the same thing. You start with the foot, it moves up the body. But you know, a better way to understand it is not really the whip. The better way to understand it is a bow and arrow. So like, for example, if you have a bow, what part of the bow goes first? The middle, right?
Yeah.
So the middle of the bow goes first, and then the ends come back to the bow. I like thinking it that way because what needs to go first is your hips, right? You push the middle of your body, like the middle of the bow, your hips, you push that first, and this loads back, and then all that comes through. So if he's asking, does the hip or the ankle go before the hip? Well, technically the hip goes first, but when you go to sequence rotation, so that's really, if it goes first, it goes linear first. But when you go to sequence rotation and you start to extend your hip, the ankle's probably, it is going to extend before the ankle or the hip fully extends.
But it's not, the movement isn't first.
Right, the first movement's hip, and then the rotational first movement is gonna be ankle, and then full hip extension. So at the end of the day, all of our movements through the body are linear and rotation. We always say it's got a rotational complement. Yeah. The rotation complements the linear energy you initially built. Yeah. But that ankle is really, what I talk about, the ankle kick is really the finishing forces to popping the hip fully open at landing, right? Yeah. So yeah, you lead through the hip, but right before you land, you kick the ankle and you extend the hip into full rotation. So if you're going to be talking about, does the ankle go before the hip in rotation? Yes. Does it go before the hip in a linear momentum movement? No, the hip will obviously go first. I mean,
because it's talking about like same timing. I'm pretty sure the question was where like same time they go as, because he was talking about hip to shoulder in relation to that. And if you try to extend both of them at the same time, just straight jump.
Exactly. You're trying to get every angle. It's like if I was going to throw my fist at you, I've got to get my forearm in that position to go forward. If I have it up, I'm probably going to throw it up. But if I want to throw it forward, I got to point it towards you to throw it forward. Same thing, we got to take the shin and we got to bring the shin down before we push and extend, because then that's going to take us to the target. When you were talking about a linear force vector to help get your trunk eventually forward.
Like you were saying with the kinetic chain, you have to have one building on the other. And if you have them all going at the same time, it's not going to be a chain, it's just that movement.
Yeah, and it's just like you said, hips and shoulders. So hips go before the trunk, the shoulder goes before the elbow goes before the wrist, and then it just moves on up, and that's the kinetic chain. All right, so that was pretty cool. If you have a question, put it down below. We'll get it on the show. This is the @TopVelocity #PitchingTips show. Subscribe, follow. We appreciate it. We want to keep doing more, so give us more questions.
Go.